Let's talk about this, boys. Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy director has made some statements that are a little bit concerning. All right? Just a little bit concerning, ladies and gentlemen. So, I have my thoughts, obviously, about the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy. I know some of you agree with it. I know some of you disagree with it. That's perfectly fine. We can all have our thoughts, and we can still hug it out at the end of the day. However, there are certain things that are being said that is a little bit concerning, considering what they've already done to the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy, right? Because one of the biggest questions that I think people have when it comes to Final Fantasy right now is whether or not Final Fantasy 17 is going to be turn-based or not. Whether or not they're actually going to, have a return to form and go back to what Final Fantasy was, or whether they're going to triple down at this point and continue with Devil May Cry Light, basically. Like, what are they going to do with the series? We don't know. We don't know. Expedition 33 kind of changed the landscape a little bit, where it kind of opened the eyes of Square Enix, and they just announced a good amount of layoffs recently. I think it was like 300 people. They just announced a new head of the company as well. Like they're going through quite a restructuring. So there's a lot going on right now with Square Enix, and a lot of people just want to know what's going to happen with the next game. Now, I don't think we're going to have an announcement for Final Fantasy 17 anytime soon, personally, but that's where a lot of people are looking to. Now, obviously, everybody knows about Final Fantasy 14 and how that game has this new expansion coming out, which essentially wants you to forget about Dawn Trail, like don't even think about it. This is kind of similar in the way that they are now thinking about, well, at least the director anyway. He says he wants to expand the long-running JRPG series for a whole new generation. So this is a little bit concerning, okay? Because the problem is that a lot of people feel like Final Fantasy has abandoned what made them Final Fantasy in the first place. Now, one of the directors that are behind the remake trilogy, which, by the way, abandoned the original story to tell this weird multiversal story, is now saying that they want to take the JRPG series into a whole new generation, which is, again, very concerning, because then it sounds like you're going to abandon it even further and go into something that nobody's going to recognize. That's really it. The problem is that with Final Fantasy, what really sold Final Fantasy was that even though each iteration of the game was a different story in a different world, you had themes in the game that were recognizable. You had themes and combat systems and job classes and just the summon system. All of these things were very consistent all throughout all the games to help you establish and recognize the franchise. And little by little, they're starting to lose that, right? Like Final Fantasy 16 went completely the other way. Whereas Final Fantasy 15 tried to do a little bit of everything. Ultimately, it was a little boring for me. But Final Fantasy 16, while I still liked the story overall, I thought the story was definitely a better paced story. There was no party system, right? There was no summon system outside of you're essentially like your weapons became your summons, right? Like you basically had summon powers. That was basically it. But there was no way to do actual summons outside of summon boss battles. Like you would be able to fight summons in boss battles, and that was basically it. All right, so it's very concerning to see all this go down, because I'm like, all right, so if Final Fantasy 16 went so far past what Final Fantasy was, where it didn't have a job system, it didn't have the standard summons, it didn't have a party system. That was one of the biggest things that confused me. No party system? No party system in Final Fantasy 16. What the fuck are we doing? Why is there no party system? So now I'm thinking about, okay, so if you want to make video games for a whole new generation, now I'm even more concerned with Final Fantasy 17. And I thought that we were past this because, again, think about what happened with Expedition 33. Square Enix, one of the people that work at Square Enix said that, turn-based video games are essentially dead. There are so many video games out there that are not even just Expedition 33 that prove that to be otherwise. I understand turn-based is not for everybody, totally get that. However, it was for the majority of Final Fantasy players, at least the people that grew up with the initial Final Fantasies for the first, 10 Final Fantasies, even 11, technically, because 11 had a real-time combat system with extremely long global cooldowns that made it essentially feel turn-based. You know? So, and even Final Fantasy 12. Final Fantasy 12 had an MMORPG-style combat system that was still somewhat turn-based. Anyway, and then Final Fantasy 13, we already know about that. And then after that, it all kind of fell apart. So, I don't know, man. Every time I talk about this, I just get less and less hopeful, I guess is the word. Not that I'm even hopeful to begin with, to be honest with you. Because it's crazy that there are other video games that are delivering a better Final Fantasy experience than Final Fantasy. That's kind of where I'm at. That's why I kind of liked Expedition 33 so much, because they even had a world map. They had a world map that was fun to actually explore. Final Fantasy 16, do you know their world map? It was fucking gay, bro. Their world map was terrible. Expedition 33, you actually had the little mini characters. You're running around. You're discovering secret bosses, different areas that are not part of the main story, all kinds of interesting shit, enemies to fight. It brought back that feeling of, okay, we clearly see somebody who understands what made Final Fantasy. We know that they were heavily inspired by them, so it played a big part in it. So Hamaguchi says the following. The director behind the ongoing Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy has spoken about what comes after his 3-part meta saga continues. He's both open to working on something entirely new and is pretty interested in finding a way to make Final Fantasy appeal to newer generations that are statistically less interested in the long-running series. Dear God. Dear God, that's going to be problematic. As whether he wants to stick with Final Fantasy or do something totally unrelated, he leaves the door wide open. Please go to something unrelated. Please go to something unrelated. Please, God. I got to be honest with you guys. I know they're claiming that they're not going to change the overall story with the trilogy of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I just don't believe that. There's no way that can be true. Right? Even if, let's say that you ultimately do end the way the original game ended, all the bullshit that happens in between that still happened. You still have the whispers. You still have the fact that Zack's alive. You still have the multiverse aspect of it. You still have the Aerith is dead, sort of dead, not dead aspect to it. You got all these fucking weird things that happen in this game that never happened in the original. So even if you ended it the same way as the original, you still can't sit there and pretend like all this other nonsense didn't happen. What, we were just all dreaming about it? Is it not real? Is that what it is? Not real? I don't know, man. I think part 3 is going to have to pull something out of their ass in order to save this story. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Zack is alive in the other timeline. I know that. That's what I said. The multiversal aspect where Zack's alive in the other timeline. And Aerith is like half alive, half not alive. I don't even know anymore. It's the damn Mandela effect? Yeah, I know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this ends up going. But I'll put it to you like this. Square Enix is clearly not doing well. They're not doing well. They've made some really, really bad mistakes. If you want to call them mistakes. I don't call them mistakes after doing it multiple times. But anyway, we'll use mistake as a word. They have made some really bad business decisions that will leave them felt it, essentially, where they now had to fire 300 people. They had to essentially restructure their company. So this is going to be their do or die. You're gonna have this do or die situation, which they've been in before, by the way, where their next upcoming games, so their Final Fantasy XIV expansion, Evercold, and Final Fantasy 17, those 2 games, and Final Fantasy 7 Remake Trilogy ending, those 3 games are going to decide the fate of Square Enix. And if they don't do what they need to do from a numbers perspective, it's not going to look good. It's not going to look good. So that's basically it. And again, as a major Final Fantasy fan, it's always disappointing, unfortunately. You have no faith, though? Yeah, I mean, I definitely I don't have faith. Ultimate Darkness says, I've seen enough theory videos. I'm actually looking forward to Remake Part 3. Yeah, I'm not, personally. I mean, it's fine if you are. That's good. I like when people are looking forward to things. But me, personally, knowing what they did in the original 2 and how it's so blatantly ridiculous, it's like Kingdom Hearts ridiculous for a reason, right? If I wanted a Kingdom Hearts style story, I'd go play Kingdom Hearts, you know? But unfortunately, we live in a world where you can't just modernize the gameplay and the combat and leave the story alone. They always got to fuck with everything. They have to touch everything. They can't just leave alone the shit that nobody had a problem with, right? Every time somebody thought of a Final Fantasy VII remaster or remake, nobody ever said change the story. Nobody ever said that. People will always say keep the story the same, update the graphics, update the gameplay. That's basically it. Nobody will ever say, hey, yeah, change the fucking story. Nobody would say that. Or better yet, in this scenario, it's more so like complicate the story. Like nobody ever said, hey, yeah, by the way, while you're remaking the game, can you just like complicate the story for me? I would really like that. Nobody said that. Which is why the second game sold nowhere near as much as the first game. The first game, I'm going to stand by this, whether people want to agree with this or not. The first game sold as well as it did only because it was a massive bait and switch. It was one of the biggest bait and switches in gaming history. It was up there almost with like Metal Gear Solid 2. Where Metal Gear Solid 2, they tried to showcase Solid Snake through most of the trailers, right? And then all of a sudden you're playing as this white boy Raiden. That's like, whoa. You know? So it was a huge, like, the bait and switch is what sold the first one. And they have been trying to catch up to that ever since, you know? They've been trying to catch up to it ever since. So the second one didn't sell anywhere near as good as the first. Even with the PC release, it just didn't. It's so funny because the first game sold even better with the PC release, but the second game, not quite. So this third game, I think the third game is going to sell better than the second because I think that curiosity is going to get a lot of people in the sense that people just want to see how this is going to end. But I don't think it's going to sell as good as the first, but I think it might sell slightly better than the second. Or maybe just as much as the second. I don't think it's going to do less. I think it's going to stagnate. Like whoever bought the second is definitely going to buy the third. That's what I think is going to happen with Final Fantasy VII Remake, the third part. So we'll see what ends up happening. But if you want to see me potentially be the angriest I've ever been while playing a video game, you should watch me when I streamed that game. I had streamed Final Fantasy VII, the second one. I was streaming gaming on Kick at the time. And anybody who was there knows that I was fucking pissed by the end of the second game. I was fucking pissed, bro. I had a nerd rage moment. It was crazy. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So, anyway, that's basically it, man.